don't worry about selling. Don't worry about pitching. Don't worry about putting up products and saying this is products $999. Don't worry too much about that bit. Deliver educational and valuable content. People will start seeing you as that thought leader, and they will come to you and say, hey, what do you have?
Welcome to Insights as a Service. This week we are talking all about LinkedIn. What's working well, what should be added, and what kind of content fits well onto that platform. And given it's about LinkedIn, and Harriet Mallow from Your Sales Code knows all about it, she's joining me. Hello, Harriet.
Hi, Brendan. Thanks for having me again.
Very welcome. Very welcome. Just before we kick in, any interesting news, anything going on in the world of Your Sales Code?
Anything going on? Lots happening at the moment. We're doing a lot more around sales kickoffs, preparing for 2023.
Okay.
That's what's happening at the moment. So I've got a couple of clients rolling through with that. So that seems to be, with the last couple of years, we've not done them. I had a couple of clients doing remote and virtual sales kickoffs, but they just didn't have the same impact. And I feel like this year and going into next year, everybody's very keen to be doing them in person.
Okay. All right. Well, let's come back to what's a bit of a market pulse check after we get stuck into some LinkedIn-focused content. So let's kick things off with currently, how are you and your clients as a sales coach using LinkedIn? What are you finding is the primary way it's used and what's working?
So LinkedIn, for anybody starting out, I think which generally tends to be when my clients are looking to make a start and really get out there onto LinkedIn, is education. So personal brand and education. Personal brand, I know we've talked about before, but personal brand in the form of thought leadership. So not necessarily as much of who am I personally, what do I do in my personal life, but more so about who am I here to inspire? Who do I want to engage with? How do I want to share my knowledge across the platform? And that's what's working extremely well. Not about selling, just about educating and connecting and sharing what it is that you know, and sharing opinions that are not necessarily general opinion is always a fun way to start as well.
So being a little bit edgy.
A little bit edgy, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any good examples of that taking form and kind of working well?
Sharing an opinion. I just a client before our podcast, we were talking about change leadership and change management. And one of the things they said to me was that a change manager won't become a full-time employee within your business. And we're putting that as a topic of their LinkedIn, of their next LinkedIn post. And he said, oh, this is going to be controversial. And I said, it's only controversial because everybody's probably thinking it, but nobody's brave enough to say it. And so it's a bit about that. So we're not doing it to create anger or to create, really strong opinions back and forth. Again, that comes a lot with other areas of personal life and business. But it's more just to say, this is what I believe and here's why. So as long as you can back it up with the why and why it's relevant to your business, your industry, or your audience, we want to keep it on track with that.
Yeah, I find a lot of marketers, probably some of the younger marketers out there love throwing a bit of shade at old school ways of thinking. They love throwing out, if your CEO is asking you to, get T-shirts printed or something, and that's their idea of marketing, then, you're in the wrong job, or, just examples of poor copy. They get conversations started, a lot of these people, by just kind of pointing out what's an example of something done poorly and get people talking that way. And that seems to land, at least for a certain portion of the public. But in terms of the initiatives that your clients use, the education piece, the sort of personal branding and creating awareness of the problem they're out to solve, how have you seen the effectiveness of that approach grow or wane on LinkedIn within, say, the last 12 months?
Ooh, I think it turned from, LinkedIn, if we go way back, like a little bit back before 12 months, it was a recruitment platform, and it was done for people sharing how good they were, or it was an online CV, and that's changed. We're telling more stories. So I think over the last 12 months, obviously with the promotion of video coming, I know you guys do a lot of video, to educate your audience and your clients and your partners, is that video has become so much more prevalent. It's being pushed up to the top of our feeds. Video is requiring us to be able to deliver things very succinctly, but also in our own words. And so whereas before we could have copied and pasted a post or sat behind a LinkedIn article, we're not able to do that as much. And so when we show up with our own opinions, our own voice, and our own skill set, and the way that we want to deliver a message, it's coming away much more authentically, but it's allowing us to showcase who we are within a very noisy industry. And if we take IT as an example, there's so much going on in IT to do with the tech and the bits and the bytes and the speeds and the feeds and the challenges and the what ifs. If we actually take that down a peg or two, and we talk about the education piece of what people don't know, or what people aren't saying, or when we say this, do we really mean this? So it's another way of being able to educate. But to really answer your question, in the last 12 months, it's just about bringing different ways of delivering a message, and delivering a message that means something to you, not just because your boss says it, or your manager says it, or everyone else in the industry is saying it.
So, but then too, you've either got to be the decision maker within the business, or be able to operate without a sense of retribution or a fear of retribution by being kind of out there with your opinion. And I don't know that all businesses have that culture, right? So if that's the way to get reach, you really can only be as effective as your company culture allows you to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Very true. Very
I was also thinking, so if and you did, right, like videos, everything now, right, like short snippets and stuff, like we're always doing that, like 2 minutes is probably long enough. If it goes to 5 minutes, you've lost them. We're all just super distracted all the time. But when I started out, go back sort of 8-10 years ago, I was writing blogs that would take me, a couple of days to probably put together. I would put them out, and sort of that would be my content for the next couple of weeks. And it would be, a link to a page on the website, and people would, I think, be pretty happy to consume content that way back then. But there's something safe about hiding behind a blog. You have a lot of time to create it, and your face isn't on it. And I think there's a lot more people that are happy to write content, but there's not as many people that are confident in front of a camera, if that's how, not just LinkedIn, but most social media platforms now want us to post content. So, in what way is that kind of limiting people's ability to get their brand message out of it? Or is it just so important now that you are comfortable?
Ooh, I mean, really interesting. I'm going to say it's twofold. One is that, people need to get more, they need to be more confident in what it is that they are putting out there. So being able to show up. People are generally, and again, it depends on your demographic and the age, is that, the younger generation coming through are so used to being on their phones and on video and TikTok and Instagram and all of that for them, it's not a huge hurdle to jump over, but being synced on a video is key. It's a skill. It's something that you have to learn. It's not something you can just turn on and it just works. It takes a lot of time to think about how you're going to process that message. But in saying that if you are not doing video, as long as your content is short and to the point, you will still get good engagement. But again, it's knowing what works for your audience. So for example, if I look at what works on my feed, if I do a post and I put that with a picture, whether that's of me or of a client or of something relevant, but it's got a human and it's got face and eyes, it gets more reach than if I just do a post that's really compelling, might have lots of content in, something you can copy and paste, or it might be a link to something really useful. It will not get the same engagement because we're not connecting the same way. So if you're not doing video, make sure you're connecting it with an image of somebody or something that isn't a stock image that's real, that's not perfect.
Yeah, so stock images suck. I refuse to have them on our website. Like they're so they've just got no sense of character, no sense of authenticity. There's just nothing in them. They're not engaging, and you can see them, right? You see the same images, and even if you haven't seen that image, you can just tell. So,
you can absolutely tell.
Yeah.
They're too polished.
So if you were the product lead at LinkedIn and you were looking to add high value features, what would be at the top of your list? Things they're not currently doing.
That's a really good question. I'm like, I've got so much power right now. Is my first thought. What I would add in like 3 tips, like the three biggest tips that you want to give to your clients, like something that people can go through and see. So if you look at our profile at the moment, we've got like a profile image, your cover photo, and then underneath your name you can put 3 things, or you can put 4 or 5 things, but generally 3 things about what you want to talk about. You've got your hashtags. I think having something where it's got 3 top tips you want to share with your audience, or 3 key takeaways, and it could be resources, or it could be tips that are written out, or it could be videos. That's what I'd like to see on there. The other thing as well, if I could have 2 wish lists, is that I would have something that gives them like an analytical overview of your profile. Because right now people don't know what's working and what isn't.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work that I do with my clients, just as a byproduct of any sales strategy, I always look at their LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn is a fantastic tool, and although it might not be something you want to lead gen through, you should be getting organic leads and building really meaningful connections through the platform. And if your profile isn't set up to do that, LinkedIn should be able to tell you what is and what isn't working.
Yeah, that makes sense. For me, just touching on what is and isn't working and that lack of clarity, I think, and this may in part come down to my own lack of knowledge, but it seems like there's some real counterintuitive actions required to get the greatest reach. Like instead of putting a link in the copy section, you have to put it in the comments section to get the greatest reach. And I really don't understand that. If you use a certain number of hashtags, it's too many, you'll not get the same reach. Like there's a lot of real little gotchas, and they're not well understood, certainly not by me. But I think for most people who aren't, sort of marketing algorithm experts, it gets quite tricky to understand the best way to get maximum reach. And I think if that was just a bit easier to understand, and we could all understand the rules that we're playing by, that would be helpful.
Yes. And so again, I guess to answer that piece, because I understand 2 sides of that. One is that if you put a link on, it takes them away from LinkedIn, and LinkedIn doesn't want you to do that. So what people are saying, and again, whether this is LinkedIn or just people, is that if you're doing that, it's going to reduce the algorithm. You're not going to be shown as much. They're not going to promote your page as much. Whether that's true or not, I'm not 100% sure.
Probably though.
Yeah, possibly. But the other side of it is that if by putting that link, LinkedIn doesn't favor you, but your audience does, as in if they click on it and that turns into calls, opportunities, links, content, information, gathering information, put the link. Because if it means you are reduced slightly on LinkedIn, but the outcome of putting that link is higher, do it.
Well, sure, that's the outcome that you're after, right? I assume. Yeah. So does it matter the vanity metrics of I got this many impressions or whatever versus the actual SQLs, the sales qualified leads? That's what you want. So yeah, good point. All right, let's talk about what's kind of not working. So what's your pet peeve on LinkedIn at the moment? What annoys you?
I'm going to say this on behalf of everybody.
Yeah.
Cold DMs, which are connections, and then immediately cold DM, followed by another cold DM, followed by another cold DM, followed by another cold DM of something that's totally irrelevant to me.
Yeah. Why does it ever work? Has anyone ever succeeded doing that?
I'm gonna say no. I'm shaking my head. I'm gonna say no. But I need to premise that is that I'm going to give you an example of somebody that reached out to me, and I have replied to them, and they never. And a lot of people say to me, they say that if I get a cold pitch, I pitch back to them, and I enjoy that sentiment. I don't think it works, but fine. That makes me feel better or sleep better at night. I'm not sure.
Sure.
But one of the key things on this is that I got a connection from a real estate CEO of a real estate business. I looked at a real estate company that were rather large. I work with a lot of real estate companies also in my business. So yeah, I'm going to accept the connection. A little bonus tip, I only ever accept connections of people that are relevant to who I believe would enjoy being in my audience, who would benefit from the tips and the posts and the content that I share. If I don't, I won't accept them. And same thing, I'm always looking for the people that I want to connect with as well. So that's kind of step one. But I accepted his connection straight away. I got a message asking me about property and about investment property and about looking for my next investment property. Well, number one, they don't know I have an investment property to begin with. I don't share that information. They don't know whether I'm looking, whether I've got the finances to look, whether that's of interest to me. So I got that message, then I got another message, then I got something else, and then something else. And I was like, really? None of this is relevant to me. So number one, it tells me that they've outsourced it to a company. That company is not aware of how to interact really effectively with people on LinkedIn. And what they're then doing, or it's a bot, so they're kind of like my three options. But on the end of that, I then replied to him and I said, thank you so much for connecting. However, can I make a suggestion that in your first direct message, you ask a question to qualify whether your new connection is of interest to do with a investment property? Can I suggest reframing this? I rewrote the message for him and sent it back to him. And I said, if you want any further context, let me know. I hope you don't mind the feedback, but I really wish you all the success, because I genuinely believe that they want to support people. You're just doing it in the totally wrong way. I never heard anything back. And my assumption is that it's done by an outsourced business. They don't want the guy to know that I'm whatever it is. But the biggest pet peeve comes from the fact that you haven't asked me. You don't know, don't assume.
Yeah, ask what problem the person's looking to fix. But I guess the problem is with that shows genuine intent and that the person gives a shit, and that takes time and doesn't necessarily scale. But at the same time, to your point before, what matters more? How many people accept your connection and see your messages, or how many people you actually genuinely connect with and have an option to sell with? Mm-hmm. I also think about the reputational damage for that person's brand. Like, you meet that person at an actual event, you're like, oh yeah, you're the person who just bombarded me, ignored my message. And even if you weren't directly aware of any of that, you still made the choice to outsource your brand, essentially.
Yes. Yeah, poor decision. But a lot of people are a lot of the clients I work with, we talk about the outreach, and obviously it's something that you and I have done together, and we look at the outreach strategies, and it's about adding value and connecting with the right people. But on the other side of that is a lot of people don't want to outsource anything, especially not on LinkedIn, because it doesn't connect with their values within their business. And so again, just what you said is totally correct, is that it's brand reputational damage. At that point, I'm very unlikely to use them because they don't understand me. And actually the what they should be focusing on is connecting with their ideal audience. I might be their ideal audience, but then post meaningful, relevant, educational content and see if I interact with it. Yeah. Share with me a post and say, did you, is this of interest? Did you find this interesting? Did you check out our recent post?
Yeah.
Find out what it is that I want. Maybe I don't want an investment property, but I might want to buy a house.
Yeah. And look, if they probably have an idea, if not what suburb you're in, certainly what city you're in, based on the LinkedIn data, right? So send a property report for price movements or whatever. Like, you're right, there's smarter ways to go about it. But I kind of think like the market should have a natural mechanism to weed out behavior that doesn't have any attribution sort of behind it, right? Like, if people are putting money towards agencies or bots or whatever that are pumping out this content, unless it's basically free, if it's getting zero result, you would think that it would cease. But somewhere someone must be engaging, I guess.
Well, I think what they're doing, and again, this is the misconception of sales, is that sales is an authentic, meaningful connection where two people win. And that can only occur if there's a genuine need, want, or desire to change. And when we're looking at the outsourcing component is, I hate selling, I don't know how to sell, and this guy has just called me, or girl has just called me and told me that they can generate me 100 leads in 3 months through LinkedIn. That's it. So all they're doing is they're saying, well, we reached out to 1,000 people, we did our job, whether it was good or not is irrelevant. And this was what I'm seeing with posting. People are posting content that's irrelevant to tick a box to say we posted. We're reaching out to people to say tick a box, we reached out. We're connecting, we're DMing. It's not relevant. Stop doing irrelevant things because they're not getting you any further.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, well, look, let's go on to, like, if you put your hat on as a user of LinkedIn, almost with sort of a consumer focus, where do you sit on? Okay, 2 questions. How do you see the current quality of content shared on LinkedIn? And how often do you come across content that sort of crosses that political or religious divide, sort of moves away from what could be, described as a reasonable business-related content?
So relevant content, I'm seeing, depends on who I'm connecting. See, again, it's based on who I'm already connected with. So I'd say it depends on who I'm connecting with. I find a lot of the time when I am scrolling through LinkedIn or I'm looking at clients that I want to engage with, I'm seeing more relevant content because I am generally only connecting with people that I want to connect with. And if I see irrelevant content and I look at the person that's sharing it and they're no longer relevant in my circle, I will remove them from LinkedIn. harsh but true.
You don't get those ones popping up where it's like someone who you're connected with has commented on something else and then that comes up?
Yes. Yeah. And that's the beauty, and that's a really, again, it works in both sides. It's great from a sales connection perspective, but from the other side, I do see things where people have commented or liked, and I'm like, why did they like that? So that's always interesting, but generally I don't spend enough time scrolling to see as much. And whether that's just because the way that I manage my time on LinkedIn is not so much of that scroll. I will spend time on LinkedIn every day, but I'm generally trying to find relevant posts or content to engage with, add value to, learn from. So I'll generally only stop if something catches my eye, and I'll read through it. To answer your second question about the religion and political views, there is a lot on there, but I tend to just scroll past. I think coming back to what we talked about at the beginning about how do we share opinions that set us apart from the rest without being what's the word, like trying to create an angry response.
Intentionally provocative.
Intentionally provocative, thank you. So if we're trying to do that, a lot of people try and do that because they want to get more comments on their post. And you can see that, and often people will call them out. So somebody will say something really provocative in that post, and then loads of people will comment and they'll be like, what, you can't say that, or I disagree, or let's burn it to the ground, or whatever it is. And someone will be like, well done, Trevor, you got all the response that you want, because I don't believe that they actually believe what they just posted. I think they're like, watch this. It's a bit like when you know a trigger point with a friend and you're like, hey, watch this. Let me ask them about the game last night or something. They're like, don't even talk to me.
Absolute trolls.
On another level.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the platform itself, though, and this isn't just like this is, I think, all platforms, they encourage that, right? To a certain extent, there's limits, but the more angry you are, the more you engage, the more active you are, and open you are to seeing other ads as you scroll through, and those impressions drive up. So it's this kind of horrible flywheel situation, I guess, and within a certain, however, inflammatory you and I might see a particular post, there's going to be a lot of people who see it as pretty spot on, and so there's always going to be the ability to build a community. But I think COVID didn't help, right? There's been a lot of diverse views raised since that kicked off, and it's been 2.5 years now, I guess. And I think that made people feel a lot more able to voice perhaps what had once been quite fringe opinions, and so that's kind of freed people up, I think, to be a bit more open with their criticism of governments, policies, mandates, whatever it might be, and that spilled on into other views, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think, again, like from that I guess really tacking on that political side of things, is that I think people have become more aware, they're more educated about certain views, and therefore that's coming across our platforms. Because before that, if someone was talking about a political view, you'd keep scrolling. Whereas now I think it's more relevant because we're like, actually, we were impacted by the decisions that we made, and therefore I'm going to take more of an active part, or play a more active part in that decision-making process when it comes to making decisions for us and our government and our state and our community.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, politics is there's a hell of a lot of politics that, I mean, arguably almost all of it impacts the business community, and whether it's sanctions or tariffs or foreign policy or whatever it might be, there's a huge roll-on impact there, right? And taxation, etc. So certainly a valid place, in my view, for it to be discussed. But with anything, it's nuanced, right? There's shades of grey, and at some point, perhaps it gets a bit inflammatory. I think it's, if we look at politics, for example, the thing with politics and religion is LinkedIn's a global platform. It's very easy to have our Australia and New Zealand hats on, but the reality is it's across the world, and in many parts of the world, political and religious discourse or statements are very normal. Like it's a part of day to day. Now we're in quite a secular country, and I think in Australia particularly, I think we tend to be fairly centrist in our political discussions, I think, and so what probably starts to feel a little bit outside the bounds of normality for us, and maybe a bit on the nose, probably doesn't really create the same issue overseas. And so it strikes me that, we just need to be aware that LinkedIn isn't just a platform for New Zealand and Australia.
No.
It's a global platform. But it also struck me there's this social contract, right? We're the product. So we kind of have to cop it. It's a free platform and whatever they choose to do. But I always feel like, I don't use Facebook. I've got an account, but I haven't touched it in years. But when you connect with someone there, it's like you're signing some sort of implicit social agreement with that person that you're prepared to hear all their crap. Like, I don't know, you're there for their life, whatever they got to say, apparently you're there to hear it. Whereas with LinkedIn, I feel like it's an implicit agreement that I'm connecting with you because I want you to have the opportunity to explain to me what you do and the value you could provide. And if there's a fit, great, let's keep talking. I'm not there to hear, hey, what's your views on, the current government, and maybe, by the way, are you religious? I don't know. Like, it's not. It doesn't feel like I've made the same agreements in signing up to that platform.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with that. I think sharing personal content or personal views on things outside of your industry, your business, your usual day-to-day sharings needs to come with almost like a reason why, if they want to keep sharing that. But again, it's, people, I've seen people complain about LinkedIn becoming a Facebook, and again, that's fine if you're seeing that. But I would then also premise the fact that actually it's because you're not connected with the right people. Because if you believe that LinkedIn's becoming Facebook, you're connected with people that are trying to make it Facebook by sharing, their pictures of their dinner or, whatever it may be. I'm not sure what they're referring to, but I know that some of the comments and some of the ways that people post certain things. But again, that's dependent on how they want to show up, what they want to post, and that's entirely up to them. And if you don't want to engage with that, or it's not relevant to you, then unfollow, remove them from your feed. You don't need to see them again.
Yeah, that's it. We have choices, right? You can choose to not engage with content. It's not hard to scroll past it. I do see a lot of people who start off posts with, I know this isn't really LinkedIn content, but there's a lot of that. Again, it's not really doing any harm. It's just a post. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
But I guess the other thing, just if I'm to take a stance for why can't you, mention your faith in posts, and again, you can, of course you can, but whether, to your point, you can choose to not engage with that content or not be a part of that community or that group. But you've got a lot of social causes associated with brands that they're very big on pushing. And I guess if I'm just taking a contrarian view here to what I'd probably usually push, which is religion and social causes are really value sets and beliefs that are quite personal to a lot of people. And in certain groups, depending what your community looks like, you're going to be surrounded by people with the same views. So it's hard, I think. I don't know the answer to this, but necessarily, what is the difference between the two? Is there a difference, and should it be treated any differently by the LinkedIn community? Answer all my questions.
Yeah, I know. You're like, ooh. I find with that one in particular is that, again, as you said, depending on the circle that you're in and depending on what it is, values come back, values live at the core of everything that we do as humans. But there's also values at the core of every business, generally, whether they've been articulated or not. And so if you want to share certain content that is connected to those values and may incite some form of religion or political view, etc., then it's relevant when we make it relevant. But again, it depends on what do we want to be known for, how do we want to show up, how do we want people to engage and connect with us, and how do we want to engage with others. And if that is having communication or conversations about religion and about political views, go for it. But if you're looking to do business, and the majority, I think they said 78% of people on LinkedIn are there to do business, and hence why a lot of our connections and engagements and opportunities are generated through LinkedIn, because people know it's a business platform. Whereas when we look at when we look at Facebook and Instagram, is that yes, there's still business platforms, there's still opportunities to showcase what it is that you do, and I speak as somebody that's on LinkedIn, LinkedIn as well as Instagram and also Facebook, but Instagram and Facebook are not my primary locations. They're an easy way to show up, I'm going to say, because it's just a nice picture and a quick video, and you get engagement, and then you do post something that's a reel and it goes viral. you've got ways to do that, and it doesn't quite get the same response on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn, you'll get real responses, especially if you're business to business. So again, if my clients are posting everywhere and they're a business to business, and I will ask them, where do they get their leads from? And if they're not getting anything off Facebook, they're not getting anything off Instagram, stop posting there. There's no point. Post on LinkedIn, post on your website, use Google. But businesses are searching for business opportunities. And if they want to talk about religion and political views, they can find people that talk about that. But it just depends on what you want in your feed. And that's all about who you're connecting with.
Yeah. I also think there's a certain subset of people that like to be enraged. And I get the feeling you're the same as me, where I just can't be bothered. I'm tired all the time anyway. And I don't need to use what little energy I have to be pissed off at some person I barely know. So it's just like, pass. Yeah. So that's the easiest way, I think. If you, as you said, if you don't like what you're seeing, just unfollow. Even if you don't disconnect, unfollow block their feed or whatever. The question for you, two questions. The first one is, since you launched your own podcast, how has the way you've treated or utilized LinkedIn changed, and what have you seen in terms of engagement, the difference in engagement?
That's a great question. I don't think I've considered that, but
have you been doing a lot more video content or a lot more like just audio snippets, which you probably weren't doing previously, I suppose?
Yes. Yeah, I would say probably the audio snippets more so, because I will do video. Video is something that I have a lot of video created because I share a lot of educational content, and I'll put that into a video. When I mentioned before about Instagram and Facebook being an easier platform to post that on, as in more so I feel the way I guess I look at my content is that when I'm posting on Instagram and Facebook, I do a lot of stories, which is on the fly, on the go content, which is relevant to what my day looks like with a client. And you won't find me posting pictures of my breakfast and tagging where I am, but what you may see is like, what does my day look like? What clients am I working with? What's the biggest challenge I'm working on today? What's the key topics of clients' questions that they've asked me today? So I'll share that across other social media platforms, but I find on LinkedIn, for me, I want my content to be more refined. So I may save that video or recreate that story in a video that's in a better format so I can share it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So that's a me problem, not the actual platform telling me that. So I guess really from that, what I may now look at, you made me think about this, is I may now look at sharing more on the fly content and see what the response is. Because
you're only going to find out one way. Yeah.
On the social media. Yeah, exactly. I love a test, Brendan.
So a bit AB.
Yeah.
That's good.
There we go. All right, there you go. You've I'll accept the challenge that you didn't set me.
Sweet, great. Let me know how that thing that I didn't tell you to do goes. I'm loath to post anything that I've recorded from my phone or anything like that. I just don't like I pretty much limit any video I do to this podcast and anything that Remain films, or maybe Dave if Remain's off, because I don't know. I don't know how to edit it. B, I feel like once you've kind of done some really nice looking stuff, it's sort of, I don't know, it's like coming down off your pedestal, off your high horse to kind of do the other version. Or maybe it's just that we've got enough content that we're pumping out that I haven't really even thought about doing it. I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me for some reason, but I know that it's well consumed and everyone's doing it just on the phone. Here's the plans for today, easy to post. But I do see on LinkedIn still a lot of people who are posting content that looks a lot more like a story from Insta or something onto LinkedIn. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm sure it does. Otherwise, people would keep doing it. But I think maybe that's something that just reflects on a brand or a person in a certain way. And I really haven't got my head around why I'm not comfortable with it, but I'm not. What do you think's wrong with me?
Brendan, because again, a lot of the content, and if I speak about the Instagram, because I call Instagram and Facebook social media, and I know that LinkedIn is a form of social media, but I just don't, they're just so different. I just can't call it under the same name. Yeah. So I'm talking about social media from an Instagram, Facebook perspective. The rule of thumb on that is don't make it perfect. If it's perfect, it doesn't get interaction. Now, this is going to be interesting because I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the test bed for this. I'm going to do some on the fly video that's done on my phone, that's not edited, that's not perfect. And I'm going to post it on LinkedIn. I'm going to let you know what the return is on that versus my pre-recorded masterclass kind of style scenario that I'm sharing. So let's see, and we can look at the results from that, and I'll share them with you.
Be interesting too from like an ROI perspective, right? Like to do something on the fly and not edit it. You pump this out pretty quick and pretty high volume. You do something perfect, you get 2 times the interaction. Well, proportionately, what's the better option?
Exactly. Yeah. It would be really interesting to see, especially because, and you also have the benefit of having Romain or David in the office with an incredible camera. I'm always commenting on how great your camera is. And I feel like your picture now next to mine just looks awful. Or mine does, sorry.
It's too high def. It's the HD is awful. Yeah. It's like a handmade show.
But I find that because you've got that, you can use that. Now, I would hire, so like not next week, the week after, I've got a content recording day, and that's for all of my online programs. I'm redoing all of the videos because the videos currently are on my phone. They are edited, but they are not high quality, super high quality. And they're more like this image rather than like the room and me talking and being able to present. So I've got I've got 9 hours recording all my content. I've got a teleprompter. I'm ready to go. But that content, because I believe that the content my clients are paying for should be a higher quality. The content I'm putting out on platforms doesn't necessarily need to would be my recommendation, but it will be interesting.
One's a product and one's not, right? Like essentially. So that's it. One's a nice to have and one's what they're actually paying for. But I think just 9 hours of filming, holy crap. I've done a couple of days where I've had maybe 2 podcasts and a video or something to do, and I'm just drained at the end of it. And it's like whatever I'm doing last takes 100 takes. So Godspeed, good luck.
Thank you. I think I'm going to need it.
And many wines when you finish, maybe. But that's cool. So I had another question as well. Oh no, you sort of touched on it earlier, but just okay. So the bots and the agencies, they suck at their DMs after they connect. You did sort of touch on it with the way you went back to that CEO with the bots and sort of giving them some guidelines. But in general, once you've connected with someone, what's your advice to people? What's the right way? What's the right timeline, if at all, to go back to that person? Or do you need to give just them the chance to consume your content and then, they kick it off? What do you recommend?
Yes. Okay. So there's a few recommendations, and I would say choose something that fits your profile, that aligns with your values, that shows up in a way that you want to show up. So the first most simple one is just connect with them and post regularly. Post regular, educational, value-driven content. That don't worry about selling, don't worry about pitching, don't worry about putting up products and saying this is products $999. Don't worry too much about that bit. Deliver educational and valuable content. People will start seeing you as that thought leader, and they will come to you and say, hey, what do you have? That's what will happen. That's the organic.
When you say post regularly, like what sort of cadence? What do you reckon?
I would say, everybody's different. I would say post 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
I like the 1 to 2. It is generally where I sit at the moment, and that's just because if you're doing it consistently, there's always content that your followers and connections can consume. I find that people will go back through old posts until something connects with them, and then they'll read that and go, oh yeah, that does connect. Or somebody may have recommended me to them, and then they'll go through and find something to find out a bit more about me.
Yeah.
So always posting relevant content. The hashtag piece, I actually got this from Nat Bibby. So Nat Bibby's the LinkedIn specialist, but he told me about adding in a hashtag that I use on every single post. So he has hashtag Ask Nat, and I use hashtag Sell with Harriet. So the reason why I've added that in is that he said that unlike Instagram, where you can see every post that you've done, if you go on to post, it will show lots of different posts, or it will show activity, and you have to go through to articles or posts or engagements to see what I'm doing. And even there, it's still a little bit noisy. Whereas if you search the hashtag Sell with Harriet, you'll see anything that I've put that hashtag on. So It's a really interesting way of doing that. So that's probably like a little byproduct extra tip.
That's a great tip.
That's one piece, would be just to connect and then post. They're going to see your post. The more they see it and interact with it, the better. The second way that I would look at doing that is sending out a message. If you do connect with somebody that you've reached out to, say if I've reached out to you and said, hey, Brendan, would be great to connect, or I've just sent you a connection with no notes. They're both working, I'm seeing at the moment. And I would then say that if I reached out to you and said, hey, Brendan, thanks so much for connecting. I share a lot of content about sales and methodology and et cetera, et cetera. if there's anything or any tips that you'd like to see more of, please let me know. This is a recent post that I did. Great to connect. Look forward to learning more about you and your business. So something very tailored that's giving value and saying, hey, if you want to see something different, please let me know, as I love answering people's questions and making sure I'm making relevant content. The other one you could then do is then say, I would love to know more about you and your business. What's your goal for the next 3 to 6 months? Or, what's your main goal for being on LinkedIn, or what are you hoping to achieve from this connection? Something like that, but it can still feel a little bit salesy at that point, and often people will just switch off.
I like the first one. Yeah.
The first one's a great way. And again, if you start seeing them liking more of your things or commenting, you can then reach out to them and say, hey, thanks so much for engaging on the recent post. We've had some great responses. What was your biggest, if you don't mind me asking, what was your biggest takeaway from the video or from the article, or did you get a chance to read it? Or here's the latest podcast. You can then add value based on that and go from there. But the whole sequence in those scenarios is just really pissing people off.
Yeah, totally. No, I like that first one. Here's what I do. Keen for feedback if you've got it. Blah, blah, here's a recent example. The other one, like I've had some people come back to me with that second example, and I still feel like I just accepted a connection. Now I feel like I've got to do work. It's like, I don't want to tell you stuff. I'm busy. Yeah. I just clicked yes because you look relevant. Don't make me do stuff.
Yeah.
So there's that. Just with the podcast as well, you're probably seeing the same thing, but when you're creating that content, I particularly saw it with YouTube when we started using YouTube well, but I think we're doing it well. But Spotify and iTunes, we saw the same thing to a certain extent, which is once you've got that back catalogue of content and you start really picking up the engagement and you get new people coming on and, month 12 or 14, they will go back and look at your old content, like you said. And so, there's a longevity in terms of the value provided by the content you create. Whereas going back to the old days with the blogs, I just used to feel like it was a one-off, it was very hard to continue to get value from that. People didn't seem to go back to it in the same way. Can't quite explain why, but maybe we just didn't have a really easy to access library of those blogs. Maybe that was part of it.
I was just going to say that it's easily consumed, and podcasts, and I know that you've talked a lot about YouTube and your strategy around that, and I do think that you're doing a great job on YouTube. Thanks. That through your through your podcasting is that you can listen to it anywhere. I can listen to it doing the washing. I can listen to it walking the dog. I can listen to it in the car. A lot of people say to me, how do you get time to listen to podcasts? Because I listen to a lot of podcasts during the week. And I said, because I always have a podcast on. And when I get in the car and connect my phone, it automatically plays the podcast. I don't listen to the radio while I'm driving. And so I might only get 10 minutes, but sometimes, and I am known for pulling over to make notes. So that
just violently bearing to the side. Cool.
Not on the freeway, to be very clear. I'm very safe where I pull over, Brendan. But just to can we just asterisk that?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Remain.
Add that in. With then that I find that the content can be consumed. Whereas again on YouTube, people are watching YouTube at night. They're watching YouTube instead of TV. And that is the way that they're consuming their TV. And whether it is work-related or not. I mean, I remember when I first started out in IT, and this is such a loser thing I'm going to tell you, I used to, I didn't know when I was learning, new technologies, especially in cybersecurity. I remember when DLP first came out, and I remember Googling it, I have no idea what DLP is. And I Googled it, and then loads of things came up, and I found 2 or 3 YouTube videos, and I went home that night, and I poured myself a glass of wine, and I got my notebook out, and I watched 3 videos on DLP, and wrote out what I believe DLP meant. And that meant then that when I was having a conversation the following day, I could bring up DLP in my conversation and know what it means from an outcome perspective, because I'd listened to other people explain it, not just the vendor explain it. And therefore, the way that we're consuming content, that if I want to know more about DLP, or maybe I was looking for a new vendor for DLP, I would find it on YouTube. So whether I'm at home drinking a glass of wine, wanting to consume some form of content and learn something, or if I'm on the go and I want to listen to podcasts, you've got both ways of consuming that content.
Yeah, totally. You're right, though. I don't really watch TV at all, except for maybe the latest season of The Boys at the moment on Prime. But apart from that, which I'm almost finished, it's just YouTube, fully. But it's mostly nerdy World War II history videos, though, so not learning too much in the way of...
Brendan.
Yeah, look at me, nerd. Anyway, okay, let's change tack slightly because I just want to just do a little bit of a market pulse check. So you're in your day-to-day role, you're working with a lot of companies out there, a lot of sales teams. We've got this macro environment, which is really hard to kind of put your finger on, which basically high inflation, at the same time high market participation in terms of the unemployment rate. Uh, labor supply is short. There's a whole bunch of contrasting market forces at play. What are you seeing at the moment in terms of sales teams' ability to sell?
Great question. The teams are struggling to get good people. That's what I'm seeing a lot of. So a lot, especially that, I'm going to say in that small to medium business where they could do with an extra one or two people. That's where I'm seeing the biggest challenge, because they need to scale to maintain the scalability of their business, to maintain the longer lead times and things like that. But they can't, because they can't find the people, and therefore it's back into them. So all their teams are being overworked. What I'm seeing on the other side of that is that people that have got bigger teams that are well known in the market, that have got an abundance of opportunities coming through, they're getting lazy. So what's then happening then is that if these smaller businesses are working smarter, they can find more opportunities. So I'm seeing both sides of the scale, and I'm seeing one area where we may be challenged, but another area where there's heaps of opportunity, and we might not necessarily need that extra person if we're working smarter in our outreach. And then on the bigger scale of things, where they've got these huge lead times still, they are losing customers because they're not communicating as much, and they are losing opportunities because they're lazy, because of all the opportunities coming through. So the business isn't necessarily seeing the fact that we're dropping 30 to 40% of opportunities. They're seeing the fact that they're closing 60% of it, and that's good enough for them. So they're both sides. Overcoming that, I'm seeing people look at other people outside of the industry, which I absolutely love. And I think we've talked about this before, I'm a massive champion for getting people in recruitment, car sales, advertising, anything that requires your resilience to be high, get them in sales, in an IT sales role.
Yeah. No, we just had Steph join us from an automotive sales background, so that's awesome. So yeah, totally get it. You don't get too much more resilient than working in that industry, so it's going to translate well. And in terms of those sales teams that are having to operate in a very lean manner because the business can't find the talent for whatever reason, are you finding that there's any smart tactics that allow them to sort of scale their outcomes past their actual, labor resource or labor constraints?
Yeah. Dedicating time to business development is really key, not just saying across the week, let's do this. Implementing a power hour twice a week. Tuesday, Thursdays work really well, where they can come together and they learn from each other and they bounce off each other. Knowing what's expected from a target perspective or an income perspective for account management versus new business, and then allowing both to be able to sell effectively. So education and communication, it probably is the two key pillars for that. So education around what do we need to educate our clients on with regards to the current landscape of availability and what's there and what's possible. And then communication with clients about that, educating teams in what outbound versus account management looks like and how we can do that really effectively. And then communication with new opportunities of how you can differentiate yourself against the rest. Because a lot of businesses, especially if I'm speaking to sales teams, they're like, well, it's no difference. Well, between us and them, there really isn't any difference. But what we say is this. Whereas actually there's loads of difference, but they're not thinking outside. They're too in it. And that's a lot of the value I add is just that new, fresh set of eyes on your business when you're so in your business, being able to kind of think outside the box and look at other avenues that you could generate without spending heaps of time.
Yeah, and I think to extend on that, it's more important than ever in that sort of environment to have the marketing team aligned on the revenue goals and working hand in hand with the sales team, right? Mm-hmm. To really help take what you've said there and articulate that in the way that resonates with the target market. Again, go back to your point, educating across various platforms and generating the demand for whatever problem it is your business solves uniquely, and off you go. So yeah, I mean that's not something we've nailed by any stretch, but certainly something that we're aware of as well. So
yeah. And you're expanding your team. So how are you? Obviously, you found Stephanie. How are you finding the market for finding opportunity?
Tight, for sure, super tight. We got lucky with Marek over in the Gold Coast as well, I think. But again, he had a telco background in South Africa, very similar. So that was good. But yeah, there's no doubt across all roles. I mean, whether we're looking at support people, rural engineers, core engineers, systems engineers, it's just tight. Like in New Zealand and Australia, there's I think we mentioned it in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, but even Chorus, the biggest fiber provider in New Zealand, they're saying there's now 2-month delays past the normal SLAs for deployment because almost entirely because their engineers have basically, with borders open, left the country to go get higher wages elsewhere, which is probably in Australia, but the shortfall in positions here is so high that barely makes a dent. So yeah, it's difficult across the board. We certainly find it that way.
Yeah, and it's interesting on the other side. You just mentioned there about the inflated requests for salary or salaries that are out there, and this may be another episode, but I guess really to kind of just touch on that is that again, a lot of my clients that have got experienced salespeople, the fear is that they will leave, and regardless of how good they've got it in that position, if you're paying them, if the OTE being offered is double, which is what I'm seeing. Wow. They can't compete with that. But I do believe that bubble will burst, and it may not be, and I believe in the next 6 to 12 months that will come to light. And I don't mean as in the figures won't be valid. What will happen is the people that have been poached won't necessarily be able to hit that target because they're not being developed, they're not being supported, they're not being coached and nurtured, and the promises have all been come over, we'll pay you all this money. And they come over, and then the minute after that 3 month, 6 months probation's hit, and they have to go and hit their own target, that's when the proof is in the pudding for it. So it will be interesting to see what comes back around. It doesn't mean they're not good. It just means that the people that recruited them didn't manage those expectations.
Yeah, and if the business itself is finding it tough, as low interest finance disappears and inflation increases, so although the GP decreases across the board unless prices go up, and then you've got a whole different problem in terms of your sales. If redundancies are to be made, then last in first out, that kind of approach.
Yeah,
so it's
paid first out.
yeah, and then those poor people have probably got home loans on variable rates that are going to be going through the roof and increase cost of the supermarket, and it just flows on. So. Yeah, I'm pretty grim, actually, aren't I? I'm pretty depressing. So I might stop.
We can't end on a grim note on a Friday.
Yeah. Look at me go. I must be fun to listen to. All right,
cool. I'm going to end on it. I'm going to give you a tip for that.
Please.
So if you're like for an MSP, if you are focusing very much on a single industry or a very specific industry type, look at varying those opportunities. So if you do an 80-20 review on your clients, so what 20% of clients are generating 80% of your revenue, if you were to flip that around, what would that look like if we were to create 80% of those 20% generators to generate now double what it is that they're currently generating, if everyone's still with me at that point, that they can then, looking at what industries are they focusing on. So again, if we take Perth as an example, when the boom was there, mining resources, I remember I wasn't here during that time, but they were talking, the stories I've heard of people literally sitting on their desk waiting for their fax to come through from the large mining, and they were just stacking up. And they would wait until 2:00 on a Friday because that's when they could clock off, because over East clocked off. They'd go to the pubs. They would literally take their stack, put it in their drawer, go for a beer, come back on Monday, process it all through, wait for the next one to come through. That's what sales was back then. If you were working mining tanked, and everyone was like, what do we do now? Where's all our sales coming from? So we had these like people that are not qualified to do sales, but which is a total side note, but they were focusing too heavily on an industry that was booming, and they never saw the fact that what if that industry is no longer booming? So right now with these interest rates, if you're working with a lot of small businesses or businesses that rely heavily on finance options, maybe diversify the clients that you're going after and build on an outbound reach, an outbound campaign to find new clients that cross-reference with the problems that you solve.
Yeah, that's the key part, because you can't be everything to everyone. But if you can find another way to slightly redress what your key core competency is, to address other markets, and often I think maybe that could just be simply the way that the market segments you look to educate, and the way you present it. It might not be too big a change, but it's great advice. Because I think when you go for verticals, it's great in terms of how focused you can be and how much of that vertical you can own, but there's some inherent risk in that as well, clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. All right, cool. Good place to leave it. Other than anything you would like to plug before we leave you?
Oh, plug. You can check out my podcast.
People should do that. That's good.
I'm gonna plug that. Yes, I think I'm on episode 10 now, so we're still new. But some really good. The two top episodes at the moment. One is LinkedIn with Nat Bibby, and the other one is PR with Lana Hill. So those two are top downloads at the moment.
Nice. Okay, I'll have a listen. I listened to your last two the other night. I think they were like the 15-minute ones. They're roughly a bit shorter. Out of interest, why the shorter episodes? Why you've done some longer, some shorter? Does it just depend whether you're doing the guest one, which goes a bit longer, versus just you've got something to talk about? It's just you and a mic and going for it.
Yes, I'm fine. Well, for me, I listen to long podcasts, so I feel like the long podcasts allow you to tell a story and really get to the end and really learn from that other person. The shorter ones I'm using more so as a solo, but also I'm delivering tools and tips and advice. So the idea behind the shorter ones is that you get to learn something and you should be able to implement whatever it is that I'm teaching in that if I think of them as mini lessons versus having a guest on. I still want tips and tools and advice and skills from them, but it's done with we're kind of covering a broader topic with a bit more information, which is easily digestible, but not necessarily something you should be implementing straight away.
Cool. Just so people can find it, what's the podcast called?
Sell Like You.
Boom. Done. Cool. All right. Thanks for joining us again. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you.